Good morning, students. Today or this week, we will be working on the demographic transition. So just again, like last week, I will just give a brief introduction about what this week is going to be about and then discuss all the articles that you either have to summarize or present on. So first, the introduction. The demographic transition is the shift from high birth rates and high infant mortality to low birth rates and low infant mortality. And this is usually aided by technological developments, higher female education, and it ultimately leads to more economic development or growth and higher living standards specifically. During a lot of these articles, you'll see there's talk about wealth, wages, and how these all interrelate with each other. So you'll often also see this refers to the theory of Malthus, and he predicted how food shortages relates to this demographic transition. There's also discussions on the on wealthy fertility versus poor fertility, if I can call it that. So people who have more wealth tended to start having more children, and that's shifted at one stage to the wealthy having fewer children and the poor more children. So the first article is by Professor Gregory Clark. He is one of the main experts on this, as well as he does a lot of work on social and economic mobility. There was a great discussion a couple of years ago where he discusses whether the American dream actually exists. So this article that we do in the course is published in the Journal of Political Economy. It is a very high-ranking economics journal. It has a 5.2 impact factor. So at the start of this course, I'm going to talk about the impact factors, but as we go along, I might, if we've seen the impact factor of the journal a couple of times, I'm just going to ignore them. But what the impact factor tells you of a journal is how, on average, how many citations and how many people read your journal article. So the higher the impact factor of the journal, the better considered journal it is, and the more people are likely to read your article. In South Africa, our incentive is not to publish necessarily in these top ranking journals, but rather to publish more. However, abroad, and for me personally, the aim is to publish in one of the what is referred to as the top 5 journals. So the economic history have 3 journals that are considered main cite worthy or citations based journals, and we will see all 3 of them later in today's session. So 2 of his books, more on social and economic mobility, include The Sun Also Rises and A Farewell to Arms. In this paper specifically, he discusses wages in England before and during the Industrial Revolution. He looks over a long period, which again relates to our history. And then he shows how human capital plays a role in, so he focuses on construction wages or building wages. And he concludes that the data contradicts some of the many theories. So Clark and Hamilton mentioned Professor Clark. It's the same Gregory Clark in this paper. Jillian Hamilton is at the University of Toronto in Canada. So this is published in the Journal of Economic History, and like I mentioned, this is one of the top economic history journals that I like to read and that most economic historians want to publish in. It has an impact factor, as you can see, much lower than the Journal of Political Economy, but it's still a 1.6, so it's still quite good. In this article, they study the link between income and fertility success, and again, when you read this article, you will see references to the Malthusian theory as well. Tina de Moor and Jan Leighton van Zanden are both at the University of Utrecht University in the Netherlands. I've met Professor van Zanden on a couple of occasions. He's now retired, but he still does work with students and publishes articles regularly. So this was published in the Economic History Review. So this is again a very good economic history journal. I like to read it. I am part of the Economic History Society. It's based in the UK. I always attend the conference. And then there's also the impact factor of 1.1. The article focuses on the European marriage pattern. So the European marriage pattern refers to the age at which girls or women used to get married and their power in the marriage market and how this matters for the demographic transitions that we are discussing this week. So it basically started in the North Sea area, which is the Dutch, Belgium areas of Europe, and then how it spread to the so it started in the west of Europe, how it spread to the east and south, east of Europe and Britain. Audit Galore, he is a professor at Brown University in New York. So he studies a vast array of theories. He studies the unified growth theory, development, diversity, and if you just go on his website, you'll see a lot more about him. Brown University, obviously one of the top universities in New York. I'm not sure if it's considered an Ivy, but it is one of the top universities. So this article is published in Cliometrica, again, a good economic history journal. It has a higher impact factor than the others. It's a 2.167. I've also attended their conferences in the US, so this is a US-based society. The society is actually the Cliometrics Society. So what does Cliometrics means? So Clio means history and metrics means obviously measuring. So that's where that name comes from. So in this article, he actually discusses various theories on demographic transitions and data and using their predictions to study the outcomes. So he supports that the demographic transition supports sustained economic growth. Sorry for the repeat of sustained in that last bullet point. Then Inflow and Mercy, I assume. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is a 2020 paper, so it's a recent paper. What I also try to do in this course is to continually update the references to ensure you get the most recent papers on the various topics, but also to show that there's continually being added to these debates, that it changes, that economic history is alive, if I can call, if you understand what I mean, and that it's growing. So again, the authors are based at Lund University in Sweden. So if you read the history of economic history, if I can call it that, in the 1950s to the 1970s about, many universities had separate economic history departments. That faded away as there became a split between economics and history, especially when economics tended towards more econometrics in the 1970s and history at that stage became more political. These departments then disappeared. Lund University and London School of Economics is one of the few who still have a separate economic history department. So again, Economic History Review, this paper is published in. So it focuses on Sweden and how Sweden fits into a more unequal debate. So you'll see they reference Italy and Southern Europe and how this compares to Sweden's experience with the demographic transition. So they also encourage the inclusion of institutions. So institutions we will discuss more later in this course. We actually have an entire week on institutions, but shortly, institutions are the rules of the game, or how do we interact in an economic setting. Oh, frame title. This should be Sillier and Mariotti. Again, a relatively recent article, 2019. So Jean Sillier and I studied together. She's now based at Lund. Martine Mariotti is in Australia at the Australian National University. Martine Mariotti is also an associate at Stellenbosch University. So this is the European Review of Economic History. Again, one of the top 3 journals of economic history with an impact factor of 1.2. It's again a very good journal that I do like to read. So this focuses on the mining revolution in South Africa and how that related to the demographic transition of white settler South Africans. So just by me mentioning that, you can think about what are some of the shortcomings of this article. And then also Olsen and Payak in 2016. So the authors are based at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden and the New York University of Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. So this is not an economic history journal, but the Journal of Development Economics. So I'm sure those of you who are taking development economics will come across it. Impact factor of 2.6. Again, it is considered one of the top journals in economics. So they take a somewhat different approach to the other articles, in that they rely on anthropological evidence as well. So again, more and more economic historians do rely on these anthropological evidence. So height data, skeletal remain data, um, any kind of digging up that can be converted into data. And they link culture to agriculture to cultural differences and how that relates to the demographic transition as well in the Malthusian theory. Specifically, the cultural differences is inclusion based versus exclusion based, but the person who's summarizing this can go into more details on that. Um, I think that is all for this week from my side. I look forward to receiving your presentations and reading your ideas on the various articles and what you learn from them.